brag about how Snoop tell you and told you he's a part of the people who put bread to kill Pac.
From behind bars, the death row boss is calling out Snoop Dogg, claiming the Dogfather had hands in the game when Tupac got hit. Old ties, street politics, and hood secrets are spilling out as Shuge drops what might be the realest confession in hip-hop history. Let's break it down. When jealousy turned deadly in the row. Yo, when Suge Knight started dropping bombs from behind them prison walls, claiming Snoop Dogg had something to do with Pac getting smoked, the whole hip-hop game went crazy. This wasn't just some regular beef or prison gossip from a bitter OG. Nah, this was the head honcho of Death Row Records. The same cat who was riding shotgun when them bullets turned that BMW into Swiss cheese on that Vegas strip back in '96. Straight up pointing fingers at one of the most legendary figures in the game. See, Death Row in the mid-90s wasn't just some record label pushing units, it was a whole empire, a street organization that had the music industry shook and basically put West Coast gangster rap on the map worldwide. At the center of all this power were three heavyweights: Suge Knight, the muscle with the mob ties, who made corporate executives piss their pants; Dr. Dre, the beat-making genius who gave us the soundtrack to the struggle; and Snoop Dogg, that Long Beach native with the laid-back flow who came through and moved over 800,000 units first week with Doggy Style. Snoop was the undisputed king of the castle before Tupac Shakur stepped on the scene. His '93 debut had him looking like the chosen one. His face was plastered everywhere from Crenshaw to Compton, and his influence had the whole West Coast on smash. White boys in the Valley and black kids in the projects all wanted a piece of Uncle Snoop. Folks was literally camping outside record stores waiting on his music like it was the new Jordans dropping. He was that dude, the biggest name in rap when Tupac was locked down doing that bid upstate. But everything switched up when Suge Knight put up that bread to bail Pac out the pen in October '95. The terms were simple but heavy. Pac would sign his life to death row, and in return, Knight would post that $1.4 million bail. What came next was a complete shift in the power structure of not just Death Row, but the whole rap game.
I went to go visit Pac. He said he was never gonna rap again. It's over. He said he had no bread. His mother didn't have a place to live. He had something he's publishing. He'd do whatever. And I told him, nah, I ain't gonna take advantage of it when he up against it. He should never say he'd never rap again.
Pac hit the pavement running with energy that was straight supernatural. By February '96, just months after touching down from that cell, he dropped All Eyes on Me, a double album that pushed 566,000 copies first week and went on to go diamond. But them numbers don't tell the whole story, fam. Tupac wasn't just making records, he was making history, rewriting the game, and showing everybody what a real soldier looked like. His charisma had folks mesmerized, his work ethic was unmatched, and his presence was impossible to ignore. Napoleon from the Outlaws, who was there watching all this unfold in real time, later broke it down. Imagine if you're the biggest star on death row, and Pac come and take all your shine, you understand? And 25 years later, Pac died, and every time you do an interview, that name is brought up. So maybe he's just trying to take that shine from Pac. The jealousy was real in them death row hallways, homie. All of a sudden, when fans ran up on death row artists, the whole conversation changed. They wasn't asking Snoop for autographs no more. They was asking where Pac at. They wasn't hyped about flicks with Snoop, they wanted pictures with Tupac. When people saw Dre, they wasn't just showing love for his beats, they was asking if he could put them on with Pac. Everything shifted from everybody else to Pac. Suge Knight himself confirmed this whole dynamic in his 2025 jailhouse testimony, painting a vivid picture of how Tupac's rise had cats in their feelings.
When Pac got bigger than everybody on death row, that's when the jealousy kicked in. All Eyes on Me came out. People come up, hey Snoop, where's Tupac? Could you get him to come over here and sign my autograph or take a picture with me?
But the beef ran way deeper than just professional envy, though. Death Row Records was a straight powder keg of gang politics and street affiliations. Snoop Dogg was a rollin' 20s neighborhood Crips from Long Beach, while Tupac, through his relationship with Suge Knight, had thrown up the blood flag with the Mob Piru set. In the deadly gang landscape of 90s LA, this wasn't just about what color rag you wore. This was life or death business. Actor and Death Row regular Faison Love, who was posted up in them studios and peeped game on all the politics, later exposed the situation. I always felt when Pac died it was because Snoop could have stopped the whole thing. Because like I said, Snoop was a Crip. Pac affiliates were Crips doing some gang shit. Some dumb gang shit, really. It set off a whole chain of events. The cracks in Death Row started showing more and more as '96 rolled on. Studio sessions that used to feel like one big family cookout turned into segregated camps. Napoleon remembered the tension getting thick. It got to a point where Snoop and him would be over there. We'd be over there. We didn't really deal with each other. But you felt the tension where it was just like, I'm not going to, it definitely, the separation had happened. The rivalry even spilled into the music itself. Faison Love peeped what he called subliminal shots on Tupac's tracks, especially on To Live and Die in LA, from that Machiavelli album. When Pac was spitting about LA being the place to be, Love caught it as Tupac claiming territory over Snoop's Long Beach hood, a straight territorial violation wrapped in 16 bars. The whole situation reached its breaking point during that trip to New York for the '96 MTV Video Music Awards. What went down in the Big Apple became a defining moment in the Tupac-Snoop relationship, and Suge Knight's account of them events is detailed as hell and straight incriminating. First, there was that confrontation at the after party with Nas, which Knight breaks down in vivid detail.
Pac seen Nas, and Pac went up on Nas at about 100. Him and Nas started conversating. Anybody that know Pac is on go status. That's all. Pac is gonna be either or. Either you gonna go, get it in, or you gonna be a gentleman and be respectful.
But it was what happened later that night back at the hotel that would permanently damage the bond between Tupac and Snoop. According to Suge Knight's version of events, Snoop did a radio interview where he basically said he was cool with working with East Coast cats, the same people Tupac believed had set him up and shot him 5 times at Quad Studios back in '94.
We listened to Snoop on the radio. Snoop is, saying that's Pac on the bush. He'll do a song with Biggie, he'll do a song with Puffy, he'll do all these songs.
For Tupac, this wasn't just a difference in business moves. This was the ultimate act of betrayal, straight snake behavior. He had put Snoop and other death row artists on his album, had gone to war for them cats, had defended them against the whole East Coast establishment. And now, Snoop was publicly entertaining working with the enemy? That's some sucker shit. The confrontation that followed was explosive as hell. Knight describes how Tupac ran down on Snoop in that hotel.
Pac took off on Snoop. Pac ran up on him, did what he did. Snoop ran this way, Pac running behind him. I stopped him. We ain't finna be doing all this in New York, making us all look like we some idiots.
The ride back to Cali was tense as hell and mad uncomfortable. Knight reveals that Snoop straight refused to ride in the same whip as Tupac, instead choosing to ride with the luggage in the van while everybody else was in limos. At the airport, things got even more heated.
When we got to the private plane, I tell Pac, save the place for all this. Let's just get to the house and y'all have that conversation later. But Snoop never got on the plane and grabbed no fork and no knife and came by Pac and banged on him and all that type of stuff. Never happened.
That flight back to the West was 5.5 hours of straight ice-cold tension. Knight describes how Tupac and Snoop barely exchanged words, with that silence hanging in the air like death itself. The last words Tupac spoke to Snoop on that flight were cold as the Arctic. "Pac, you going to Vegas to the fight, cuz?" Snoop gave him nothing but a cold head nod in response. The relationship had shattered like glass, possibly beyond repair. And as that summer of '96 moved toward that fateful September night, the stage was set for tragedy to strike. The night everything went left. September 7th, 1996, started off like any other major event night for the death row family. Mike Tyson was about to beat Bruce Seldon's ass at the MGM Grand in Vegas, and this was exactly the type of major event that the whole death row roster would normally pull up to. The fight, the after party at Club 662, owned by Suge Knight himself, these were mandatory functions for anybody claiming death row, except this time somebody major was MIA. Suge Knight's account of Snoop's absence that night is one of the most incriminating pieces of his whole interview.
Nobody in our circle or death row doesn't go to the fight, and everybody go to Club 662 after the fight. Everybody. So we were surprised when Snoop didn't show up because they got ringside ticket paid for. We were surprised they wasn't at the club. But later on, we all learned why Snoop did not show up.
But Snoop being ghost was just the beginning of what Knight found fishy as hell. According to Knight, Snoop had allegedly called a meeting at his crib before the Vegas trip, convincing other death row homies not to make the trip. Kurupt from Thaw Dog Pound supposedly said that Snoop had a meeting where they decided they wasn't going to Vegas. Even Nate Dogg, another death row artist, allegedly told folks he would go to Vegas as long as I don't be around those niggas, meaning Tupac and Knight, implying he was scared of getting caught in the crossfire. The most chilling detail in Knight's whole story involves Warren G, Snoop's Snoop's stepbrother, and one of them high-powered radios used for death row security. According to Knight, Warren G said that Snoop was at his house watching the fight and had one of these security walkie-talkies, the kind that covered the whole West Coast and was only used during major death row events for security coordination. What Warren G allegedly heard through that radio that night was straight bone-chilling. Knight claims that Warren heard the whole shooting go down in real time, including hearing somebody say, "Got it," right after them shots rang out. Knight's interpretation: the writing's on the wall. Only time a person got one of those radios is if they was going to a club or event that they can communicate with their security. The implications were clear and horrifying as hell. If Snoop had that radio and Warren heard the shooting live, did they know what was about to pop off? The events of that night have been documented heavy. After the Tyson fight, Tupac and members of Death Row's crew got into it with Orlando Anderson, a Southside Crips gang member, in the MGM Grand Lobby. The whole beatdown was caught on security cameras, showing Tupac and his homies stomping Anderson out after somebody from Death Row's crew pointed him out as the cat who had previously tried to snatch a Death Row chain. But Knight suggests the whole MGM assault was orchestrated, a setup designed to get retaliation popping.
Something was told to Pac to make Pac go on one. And when you really look at it, we know, everybody know, that was just a plot. That was just a plan. That happened what happened.
Knight's theory is that somebody fed Tupac information that Orlando Anderson was part of a plot to murk him, deliberately setting things off to ensure Pac would put hands on Anderson, thereby setting in motion the whole chain of events that would lead to his assassination. Hours later, as Suge Knight was pushing that BMW with Tupac riding shotgun down the Vegas Strip toward Club 662, a white Cadillac pulled up alongside them at a red light near Flamingo Road and Koval Lane. 4 shots exploded, hitting Tupac in the chest, pelvis, and thigh. Knight caught shrapnel, but survived. Tupac was rushed to University Medical Center, where he underwent surgery and was put on life support. For 6 agonizing days, Tupac fought for his life in that hospital bed. During this time, Knight kept calling Snoop, pressuring him to come visit Pac. But Snoop didn't show up at the hospital. Instead, he pulled up to Knight's Vegas crib, where Tupac's mother, Afeni Shakur, was staying. What happened at that house visit became another piece of Knight's narrative of suspicion. According to Knight, Snoop's behavior was straight bizarre and disturbing. Snoop started crying and fell start throwing up, like literally throwing up. We looking at him like, damn, what happened to this dude? Snoop allegedly told Afeni that Tupac hates me right now because of their beef, including when Tupac had squared up on him in New York over them radio comments. Afeni, showing that motherly grace, urged Snoop to visit Tupac anyway, but Knight maintains that the hospital visit never resulted in any real peace. In contrast, Snoop Dogg's own version of visiting Tupac in the hospital, shared in a 2023 interview with Big Boy, is filled with emotion and pain.
Right after I heard Tupac got shot, and I was so weak I damn near fell over. I immediately flew to Vegas, and I walked in the room and I seen him laid out on the bed with all kind of tubes in him. And his mom came over to me and she grabbed me, she held me up, and she said, "Baby, you got to be strong." And I went and sat next to him and was whispering to him, telling him I loved him and to hold on and he was gonna be okay.
On September 13th, 1996 at 4:03 p.m., Tupac Shakur died from his injuries. He was only 25 years old. The murder stayed officially unsolved for damn near 3 decades, spawning endless conspiracy theories and leaving a wound in hip-hop culture that's never fully healed. But for Shuge Knight, who really killed Tupac, wasn't no mystery at all. In his 2025 Jailhouse Interviews with the Art of Dialogue podcast, Knight made his most direct and explosive accusation yet.
Any artist, not only was they jealous of Tupac, some of them participated in the dark, some of them participated in the dark, in the downfall of Tupac. Snoop knows.
Knight's accusations weren't limited to just Snoop allegedly knowing what was about to go down. He straight up claimed that Snoop put up the bread for the hit, motivated by jealousy, as Tupac took his spot as Death Row's #1 artist. Knight's theory was that Tupac's death benefited everybody at Death Row except Knight himself, who would eventually lose the whole label to bankruptcy in 2006. But Knight went even further, bringing Ray J into the conspiracy through alleged recorded phone conversations. Knight's claims extended to suggesting that Snoop and others had been trying to bail out Keith D, the cat who was eventually arrested in 2023 and charged with Tupac's murder because he talking too much. The implication was clear. They wanted to keep Keith D's mouth shut about what really went down that night and who really funded it. The motive, according to Knight, was simple hood politics: jealousy, greed, and money. Knight painted a picture of a calculated setup where Tupac's rising stardom and dominant presence at Death Row had made him a target not from East Coast enemies, but from his own West Coast homies. In Knight's narrative, the only person who truly took an L from Tupac Tupac's death was Knight himself. Everybody else, Tupac's moms, who inherited his estate, the Outlaws, who built whole careers off their association with Pac, Interscope Records, which kept getting paid off posthumous releases, even the secretaries and lawyers. Everybody ate off Tupac's death and the legendary status that followed. Everybody except the cat who was riding with him when them bullets flew. The fallout and the streets' verdict. The response to Suge Knight's allegations was swift and the streets were divided. Snoop Dogg addressed the accusations dismissively on February 26, 2025, in the comment section of the Art of Dialogue's Instagram post, writing, "This nigga won't stop talking about me, mad cause I own Death Row, and I realize your lies." The reference to owning Death Row was significant as hell. In 2022, Snoop had copped Death Row Records from MMNRK Music Group for an undisclosed amount, rumored to be around $50 million, reviving the legendary label's catalog with new artists. For Knight, doing a 28-year bid for voluntary manslaughter, this acquisition was salt in an already deep wound. He had repeatedly expressed resentment, claiming Snoop destroyed the label's legacy by mismanaging it. But Snoop's dismissive response didn't address the meat of Knight's claims, and that silence spoke volumes to cats paying attention. The hip-hop community found itself split down the middle into different camps. On one side were Knight's supporters, who pointed to the suspicious circumstances surrounding Snoop's absence from Vegas. They noted that it was highly unusual for Snoop, one of Death Row's biggest stars, to skip both the Tyson fight, for which he had VIP tickets already paid for, and the after party at Club 662. The detail about Warren G allegedly hearing the shooting through a security radio was particularly compelling to this squad. The conspiracy theorists pointed to Keith D's 2023 arrest and his claims about being paid $1 million by Diddy for the hit, though this claim was unrelated to Snoop, as evidence that there were indeed financial motivations behind Tupac's murder. If Diddy could allegedly put up bread for such a hit, couldn't jealous Death Row artists have done the same thing? On the other side were Knight's critics, who questioned the credibility of a cat speaking from behind bars, with clear motivations to lash out at those who were eating while he remained locked down. Reggie Wright Jr., former Death Row head of security, called Knight a douche in a March 25, 2025 Vlad TV interview, defending Snoop and dismissing Knight's claims as stupidity. Media outlets were similarly divided. Vibe magazine labeled Knight notoriously unreliable, while acknowledging that his insider perspective made his claims impossible to completely ignore. The allegations also brought up earlier theories about Snoop's potential role in Tupac's death. Faison Love's 2017 statements about Snoop's ability to prevent the murder through his gang connections took on new significance in light of Knight's more direct accusations. Love had theorized that Snoop, as a high-profile Crip with significant street pull, could have brokered peace and prevented the retaliation for the MGM Grand Beatdown.
I always felt when Pac died, it was because Snoop could have stopped that whole thing. I mean, because like I said, Snoop was a Crip, and Pac offended some Crips, doing some gang shit, some dumb gang shit, really. It was a whole, set off a whole chain of events.
Love's theory was more nuanced than Knight's direct accusation of funding the hit, but both arrived at the same conclusion. Snoop could have, and should have, done something to prevent Tupac from getting smoked. Perhaps the most damaging testimony came from Napoleon of the Outlaws, who had been in the trenches during the Death Row era and witnessed firsthand the dynamics between Tupac and Snoop. In multiple interviews between 2023 and 2025, Napoleon consistently maintained that Snoop's jealousy of Tupac was real and deep. Napoleon's 2023 comments were particularly pointed.
Yeah, I think he might, you know what I mean? I can say like Pac did come to Death Row and just like took a shine from a lot of people. It's because I remember how he tried to make it seem like Snoop said, I sat back and let Pac shine. That let you know right there, nah, bro, you ain't sit back, but he just was coming and shining. And you just happened to just lay back.
By 2025, Napoleon had escalated his claims, accusing Snoop of sneak dissing Tupac more than Pac's actual enemies ever did. He pointed to Snoop's revelation in a 2023 Big Boy interview that he didn't like Tupac's Hit 'Em Up as evidence of posthumous shade throwing.
Even when he played Hit 'Em Up the song, I didn't like the song.
Did you feel like it was
I didn't
too
like
much?
it. Right. I didn't like it. Like, I didn't like the shit. Like, it wasn't like shit to me. Like, it was you buying more problems, cuz.
Napoleon checked this whole narrative, asking why Snoop never expressed these concerns when Tupac was alive and breathing. For Snoop to say he never liked Hit 'Em Up, he never said that back then. Now, 25 years later, nah, bro. Focus on the positive, not the negativity. The pattern Napoleon identified was troubling as hell. Snoop would make public tributes to Tupac, appearing tearful and emotional like he was really torn up, but would then make comments in interviews that subtly undermined Tupac's decisions and legacy. It was death by 1,000 cuts, not the outright hatred of enemies like Biggie or Diddy, but something potentially more snake-like, the resentment of a homie who felt overshadowed. What makes this whole story particularly tragic is how it contrasts with Snoop's own emotional recollections of Tupac. In various interviews over the years, Snoop has spoken movingly about his friendship with Tupac, about their creative chemistry, about the pain of losing him. So which version of Snoop Dogg is the real one? The grief-stricken homie who threw up after seeing Tupac laid up in that hospital bed, or the jealous rival whose absence from Vegas on that fateful night remains unexplained? The answer might be that both versions are real, that human nature is complex enough to encompass both genuine love and destructive envy at the same damn time. What cannot be disputed are the facts that form the foundation of this whole mystery. Fact: Tupac and Snoop had a documented falling out in New York over Snoop's radio comments about working with East Coast artists. Fact: Snoop was conspicuously absent from Vegas on September 7, 1996, despite having VIP tickets and the event being a death row mandatory appearance. Fact: no death row artist, including Snoop, contributed posthumous features to Tupac's albums or showed up to significant memorial events like his Hollywood Walk of Fame stars ceremony. These facts don't prove Knight's allegations of direct involvement in funding the hit, but they do paint a picture of a relationship that was deeply fractured in Tupac's final months. The truth is that we may never know the complete story of what went down on September 7, 1996, or who truly bears responsibility for Tupac Shakur getting smoked. Dwayne Keith D. Davis was arrested in 2023 and charged with murder with a deadly weapon, confirming that the hit was indeed carried out by Southside Crips in retaliation for the MGM Grand beatdown. But whether there were others behind the scenes, pulling strings and providing that bread, remains an open question. Suge Knight, for all his credibility issues and obvious axes to grind, remains the only living person who was in that whip with Tupac when them bullets flew. He took a .45 caliber bullet that remains lodged near his skull to this day. His perspective cannot be easily dismissed, even if it cannot be fully trusted. As for Snoop Dogg, his silence on the specifics of Knight's accusations is deafening. His brief Instagram comments dismissing Knight as jealous about the death row acquisition don't address the core questions. Why weren't you in Vegas that night, homie? What was said in that meeting at your crib? Did you really have a security radio at Warren G's house? What recordings exist of conversations about Tupac? The hip-hop community remains divided, and the beef continues to trend on social media, with no signs of resolution or reconciliation in sight. Knight, eligible for parole in 2034, continues to make statements from Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility, each interview adding new details to his narrative. Snoop continues to thrive commercially, his death row ownership allowing him to profit from the very catalog that Tupac helped build into an empire. What we're left with is a tragedy wrapped inside a mystery, coated in jealousy, money, and the violent gang politics of 1990s Los Angeles. Whether Snoop Dogg was actively involved in Tupac's murder, passively complicit through inaction, or completely innocent but circumstantially connected, one thing is certain: the relationship between these two West Coast legends was far more complicated and darker than the public ever knew. The final word might belong to Shuge Knight himself.
When I'm telling you, only person in that motherfucking car was me and Pac. Orlando Anderson did not shoot neither one of us.
Who in his jailhouse interviews repeatedly emphasized one haunting point. If Orlando Anderson, the cat long suspected of being the trigger man, didn't shoot them, as Knight maintains, then who did? And more importantly, who put up the bread for it? These questions continue to haunt hip-hop culture nearly 3 decades after that September night in Las Vegas. The murder of Tupac Shakur remains one of the most significant unsolved mysteries in music history. But with Suge Knight's explosive allegations against Snoop Dogg, the question has shifted from who killed Tupac to something far more disturbing. Did the order come from inside the death row family? Perhaps the most chilling aspect of this entire saga is the realization that jealousy, as Knight noted, is worse than hate.
Jealousy is worse than hate. When a person hates you, they just hate you. When a person is jealous of you, they can never sleep or rest.
The ghost of Tupac Shakur still looms large over hip-hop, his influence undiminished by time. And as long as Suge Knight draws breath behind bars, and as long as Snoop Dogg continues to profit from the death row legacy, the questions will persist. What really went down on September 7th, 1996? Who knew what was about to pop off? And could one phone call, one intervention, one moment of loyalty have changed everything? These are questions that may never be fully answered. But in the court of public opinion, in the archives of hip-hop history, and in the memories of those who witnessed the rise and fall of Death Row Records, the debate rages on. Like this video, click on the card showing on your screen for more.